Hi, today we're going to be talking about asbestos exposure in the military service, conditions it could have caused, who could have been exposed, different benefits you can get. So we hope that you'll join us in order to discuss this information. Hi, and welcome back to Hill and Ponton's VA Disability blog. My name is Natalia Joffrey. I'm the company COO.
And I'm attorney Melanie Williams.
And today, Melanie and I are going to be talking about a pretty hot topic, which is asbestos exposure in the military service. So, Melanie, I know that we hear about this, we see commercials about it, but what we're going to do today is a little bit different because we're going to talk about how veterans are specifically or could have been specifically exposed to asbestos. But I want to go back to a little bit more basic information, and then we'll grow from there. Can you tell everybody what is asbestos? Is it a natural substance, or what is it?
Yes, so it is a naturally occurring material. It's found in rocks and soils. Not to get too technical, but it's composed of thin needle-like fibers that are actually soft and flexible. The important thing that we would need to know about it is that it's heat resistant, so it's used as a fire resistant, as insulating material, and it can be used to make materials stronger, like cement and plastic. So that's why it's used so widely in so many industries, because it has great benefits to different materials. The problem with it is that when it's inhaled or ingested, it becomes permanently trapped in the body, which can then cause inflammation, scarring, genetic damage, which could then lead to cancers and diseases. Basically, what you need to know, it's been banned in more than 60 countries, but it hasn't been banned in the US. So that kind of shows how bad it is. Yeah.
That's kind of sad and terrible. So it is purposely used. I thought that it was just, inherently, unfortunate that sometimes it's present in certain materials. Like I know we hear about talc cases, and it's because, like you said, it comes from rocks and minerals. And so inherently it was sometimes in the talc, or in the materials used for talc. But sometimes it is purposely used in order, like in cement.
Yeah, it is purposely used for its beneficial factors, like the fact that it's heat resistant and it's used as insulation and things like that. I think the negative health effects about it weren't realized until later, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as to why.
Okay. So speaking of, when you could have been exposed, who may have been exposed to this in the military?
So if you served in the military from the 1930s to the 1970s in all branches, you are at high risk because the military used it extensively. In the Army and the Air Force, both used asbestos in electrical wiring, insulation, vehicles. The Navy and the Marines used it in ships, shipyards, airplanes, other armored vehicles. And with those ships, they also had poor ventilation, which makes something like asbestos a lot worse. If you were a vehicle mechanic, so while performing routine maintenance work on vehicles, they were asbestosis in brake pads, clutches, bearings, gaskets, aircraft mechanics, because it was also used in the rudders, fuel systems, hydraulic systems, veterans who work with boiler systems, piping or cooling systems. According to the VA, this is the list of, they say any veteran who worked in the following could have been exposed: shipyards, construction, carpentry, demolition, mining and milling, insulation, pipes, roofing, flooring, cement sheets, and friction products. So it's a lot.
Goodness.
Not only that, you could have also been exposed because it could have been hidden in your sleeping quarters or within vehicles, within weapons, within buildings. And it's not only veterans from the 1930s to 1970s. Also, they have found that in Iraq and other countries in the Middle East, they imported large amounts of asbestos in recent years for construction. So if a building was demolished, desert winds could have spread the asbestos for miles, exposing all the veterans that served in Iraq.
You're going down this list, which is almost incomprehensible to me. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, you're pretty much covering, I mean, that's a lot of points of exposure. If you were in the
Yes.
service during those years, there were
Yes.
a lot of opportunities for you to be exposed.
Right.
It's so interesting. You give this information, and I don't think you realize like how informative it is, how mind-boggling it is. Like, I always thought asbestos was something that sometimes, unfortunately, in the 70s was in the insulation, and so you breathed it through these vents. We've heard of sick buildings, and that was pretty much, it was just a happenstance and an unfortunate coincidence. But from what you're saying and the way it was used, I mean, that it was actually even used.
Yes.
This is crazy. And we were just talking earlier about Vietnam veterans. And so this is still a large portion of our population that could have been exposed to asbestos and have conditions as a result of that exposure right now. Like, this is not, I think that lots of times people think, oh, this was a long time ago, so this isn't affecting me now. This doesn't qualify. But just the list that you gave: shipyards, construction, carpentry, the mining, the milling, and then the fact that you said that it could have been in the living quarters. Goodness gracious. And then you were saying that even in recent wars with Iraq, did you say Iraq and Afghanistan were importing it?
Iraq specifically, but other countries in the Middle East as well. So it's likely.
Yeah. Okay. So give us an idea. What medical conditions are linked to asbestos exposure? Because you may have a condition and be like, I had no idea this could have been because of asbestos. So can you give us an idea of what some of those conditions could be?
Yes, so there are cancers and there are also non-cancerous conditions. They're going to revolve mostly around the lungs. The most popular is what's called mesothelioma. It's a cancer that occurs in the thin layer of tissue that covers the majority of the internal organs. It's almost exclusively caused by asbestos, so that's why that's the one that we hear the most. Yes. There's also lung cancer, ovarian cancer, laryngeal cancer, and then some of the non-cancerous conditions, asbestosis, which is scarring of the lung tissue that causes breathing problems, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. There's also pleural plaques and effusions and diffuse pleural thickening. Basically, it's scarring in the inner surface of the rib cage and the area surrounding the lungs, so it can cause breathing problems. So you'll want to look for symptoms like pain, cough, breathlessness, shortness of breath, pain around the rib area, just different lung-related conditions.
I know that you mentioned asbestosis, and I know from my experience with these cases, because there's also Mass TORT claims, by the way, associated with these claims. And just so that people know, you can have both. You can pursue a claim for veteran benefits or disability benefits as a result of illness resulting from asbestos exposure, and you could also have, a Mass TORT claim because of this exposure as well. So they're not mutually exclusive. But you mentioned asbestosis. So just to touch on that really quickly, can you qualify for benefits for asbestosis as well as asbestos exposure, and for that condition?
Yeah, so asbestos exposure is not a condition in and of itself. So that's not something that you claim. You claim a condition or an illness or disease that you have. So asbestosis is the condition. That is the diagnosis that you would be claiming for. And again, whether it's, mesothelioma or any other condition, you're claiming the condition that you have, and then the cause of it is the asbestos exposure.
Okay. Is it difficult to prove the exposure to the asbestos?
Just like anything else with the VA, you'll want to make sure that you have sufficient evidence. So you'll either want your service records, or you'll want to provide a statement where you're going to specify your MOS, what your military duties were, describe your duties in detail, and you'll want to talk about how you were exposed, how often, and for how long. And then that's going to help establish, because we know all these different areas where exposure was used, that's going to help show that you were exposed to asbestos.
talking about exposure, what if what and we I think we have a lot of veterans that could fall under this. What if you were exposed to several different things? I mean, what if you were exposed to asbestos, but you were also exposed to Agent Orange, but you were also exposed to other herbicides? How do they figure that out? Or how do they know which umbrella to put you under, I guess?
Right.
Or does it matter?
So each exposure or toxic chemical is going to have its own sort of set of diseases or conditions. So, like for Agent Orange, we know there are certain presumptive conditions like diabetes type 2. Asbestos exposure does not have its own presumptive conditions, but the lung conditions are more related to asbestos, while Agent Orange has different other types of conditions. So it's going to depend on what medical evidence shows, what scientific studies have shown that what conditions are caused by which type of exposure, which chemicals. So basically, you'll want to claim all the conditions that you have and explain the different ways that you were exposed. And then a doctor, either the VA examiner or your own doctor, will kind of help figure out what conditions do you have that are due to what toxic exposures.
Okay, great. Any other advice you can give on these claims, and maybe can you tell veterans what to do if they feel that they have been exposed to asbestos?
Yes. So one of the tricky things with these asbestos claims is your condition may not show up for years and years. It can remain in your body for decades. We're talking 10 to 70 years after your initial exposure. Cancers can take 20 to 50 years to develop. So you may have been exposed in the 70s, and then now is when you're having symptoms and you wouldn't even think that it's due to asbestos. But so you'll want to talk to your doctor, whatever you notice, whatever you feel, particularly related to lung conditions. Make sure that you talk to your doctor so that they can give you a proper diagnosis. And then you'll want to try and think back and remember how you could have been exposed to asbestos, and then have the doctor make that connection for you.
Okay, as usual, great information, Melanie. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you have any questions or want additional information, please feel free to visit our website or call our office. Otherwise, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.